They've got it.
They've got it right by.
And they're the ones putting out the pornographic stuff and putting out everything.
I don't know why they do.
You see, the Bible makes a distinction, Mr. President, between two groups of Jews. One is called the synagogue of Satan.
The Bible says there are two different kinds.
There are two different kinds. And those people, in the latter days, it's called the remnant of God's people, which will be Jewish people. And then there's the synagogue of Satan. And nearly all of your religious deceptions in the latter days are what they call the synagogue of Satan. In other words, they are energized by a supernatural power called the devil.
They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities. And I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. With a foolish nation.
Deuteronomy 28:68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you.
The prophecy of returning to Egypt with ships symbolizes the journey of enslaved Africans to the Americas. They were sold into bondage, echoing the brutal conditions of slavery endured by Black Americans on plantations and in labor camps. And even until this day, no man have redeemed or saved them from their place of captivity.
Isn't it interesting how all the secret societies and clubs, occult clubs, are in roughly the same area in Washington, D.C.? Whatever's Egypt got to do with the United States of America? It's strange, it all seems to be in one area, and it's a very privileged area of Washington, D.C.
The Freemasonic symbolism that surrounds Washington, D.C. is absolutely undeniable.
What is this place? Ancient Egypt. Why is this in the heart of DC? Well, there's your link to ancient Egypt. These are the secret societies, my friends.
Now fast forward to today, and at the inauguration of every American president, across town at the House of the Temple, the modern Egyptian magicians, the Freemasons, Scottish Rite, 33rd degree, are conducting the raising of Osiris ceremony to call the seed of Osiris Apollo from the underworld through the Washington Monument obelisk, where it magically emits into the U.S. Capitol dome, while America's new leader is standing there accepting his role as the living representative of Osiris.
In the Grand Lodge of Masons in Massachusetts, a walk down the halls and a peek behind a door can uncover some interesting finds. In this case, it's not just one door to pass through, it's many doors until you discover the hidden treasures of a beautifully designed lodge room called the Egyptian Room. A quick scan of the lodge reveals ornate furniture including benches, chairs, and an altar in the center. Finely carved images of Egyptian leaders adorn the arms and backs of the furniture.
You would think this is somewhere in Africa. You would think this is somewhere in Egypt. But nah. This is in Memphis, Tennessee, tore down in the late 1800s. You see the state column buildings in the back? Those buildings are still used today as Capitol buildings. You see the pyramids? We know the truth now.
Did you know in the year 1819, President Andrew Jackson helped pick out and name the city of Memphis, Tennessee? That name actually comes from an ancient Egyptian city that was actually the capital of Egypt for several thousands of years, through most of the Bronze Age up to about the 6th century BC. The city was actually mentioned in the Bible several times with different Hebrew names and other different forms. Ezekiel 30, verse 13 says this: "This is what the sovereign Lord says, I will destroy the idols and put an end to the images in Memphis." This is what the sovereign Lord says, I will destroy the idols and put an end to the images in Memphis.
Yeah, Mason Bible. Totally demonic. Well, for Masonic use, so they've got alternate definitions of words. But what really shocked me the first time I picked this up, sun god, Ra, Amen, the Father of God, the Creator, published in the Freemason Bible, which is near as I can tell, it's a King James version. People like Jordan Maxwell and the woman who made Ring of Power, they try and mix up language and they say, oh, well, when you say Amen at the end of a prayer, you're really, this is who you're saying your prayer to, Amen Ra. Well, that's a lie. No, Amen is Hebrew.
Ancient mystic Oriental Masonry, its teachings, rules, laws, and present usages. In America, rediscovered in the 15th century and repopulated in the 17th, was recovered Egypt and the Promised Land, or the land of the constellation of the Eagle. Of the constellation of the Eagle.
And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies, for bondmen and bondwomen. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, as swift as the eagle flieth.
Deuteronomy 28:49 is a reference to a nation coming against the Israelites swiftly with an unfamiliar language, resonates with the arrival of European colonizers in Africa and the Americas.
Here in the House of the Temple atrium, there are 2 Egyptian block statues that are guarding the entrance to the grand staircase that leads up to our temple room upstairs. There's one here and one over on the other side. And on the front of these, you'll notice there are pictures that are hieroglyphics. And you might think, well, maybe they're not real hieroglyphics. Maybe they're just kind of random things carved in there. But these are actual real hieroglyphics. And they have a translation. And if you want to know what these hieroglyphics mean, you just look below here. And the hieroglyphics for this statue, which are here, their translation also is right below.
So you are saying that there's a great chance, or more so, that the black people that links directly to the slave trade are from the lost tribes of Israel. Is that what you're saying here, sir?
Yes, I am.
The black people that links directly to the slave trade are from the lost tribes of Israel. Is that what you're saying here, sir?
Yes, I am.
Why? Why is it, I thought, that black Jews are so deeply troubling somehow to Western sensibilities? It really puzzled me for a long time. And it was interesting, it was fascinating to see that Enlightenment scholars at the end of the 18th century were equally puzzled. And the reason that they were puzzled, why were they puzzled? They were puzzled because they didn't know how they became black. They were puzzled because they didn't know how they became black. Why then, all of a sudden, do the people that we're all interested in this group, everybody here is interested in the question of Jews, as we say, of color, throughout the world. I mean, that's one of these are the groups, Kulanu and me, we've been very interested in. At the end of the 18th century and for the first half of the 19th century, Jews of color were not marginal. They were mainstream preoccupations of people. That's something which I'm the first person to point out. It was interesting for racial theorists for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that you've got, for the first time, the idea that Jews are multicolored, right? First time, the idea that Jews are multicolored, right? Even today, there are genetic scientists who fiddle around with the proof in such a way that it looks as if, there are races and that they're kind of significantly different from each other. But it really is not the case.
So should we go to the question about conflation? What does conflation mean? Were there different kinds of conflation of Jews and blacks over time? Or should we go to the question of looking at your slides?
Well, let me quickly just deal, because the conflation is in the title of my book. And I think just to say what I mean by it would be a good introduction, really, to the slides. Blackness and Jews really went hand in hand.
So let's go to the slides now.
Just a sec, because I just need to say, in the 19th century, the idea of Jewish blackness was reinforced by the discovery of all of these actual black Jews in India and Africa, all over the place. And by 1850, the main racial theorists of the day started saying that yes, actually, Jews are Negroes. Jews are Negroes.
When you begin to look at a lot of the studies, you begin to look at their articles and books that discusses the evidence of the Negro population inside of ancient Egyptian culture. And they begin to talk about how the Negroes influenced it. Now, a lot of that come because they want to try to say that the Egyptian was a Caucasoid type people, because they're looking at the people in the land today. There's a book called Black Image in the White Mind, where a craniologist by the name of Morton, he did a study, and he began to compare the Egyptian skull with that of the African American. And he concluded that the African American had the same servile function in ancient Egypt as they do in America today.
Pause. Okay, let's stop for a second and let's revisit what we just learned about Dr. Paul Morton. Now, in his book, Crania Egyptica, his research found that the Egyptians were in fact Negroid, but not Negroes. The Negro skulls were slightly longer than the Egyptian skulls, but upon studying the skulls found of the servant class in Egypt, he found the Negroes in America to be exact matches. Now, this is the full quote from the book Black Image in the White Mind, page 75. Morton pointed out that both cranial and archaeological evidence showed that the Egyptians were not Negroes, as abolitionists and colonialists had maintained. Now let me read that first part again. Morton pointed out that both cranial and archaeological evidence showed that the Egyptians were not Negroes, as abolitionists and colonialists had maintained. Now, why did Morton say that both abolitionists and colonialists connected the slavery of the Negro in America to Egypt? Now, when anyone thinks slavery and Egypt, the images that come to mind are usually connected to one time and one event: the Exodus. The story of the oppression and bondage and redemption of Moses and the children of Israel under the heavy hand of Pharaoh Thutmose and the ancient Egyptians. Morton makes the claim that abolitionists and colonialists claim that the blacks were Egyptians. Yet his studies of skeletal remains, mummy heads, and tomb inscriptions, proved by Egyptologist George R. Giddon, prove that blacks in America had a connection to Egypt, but were not Egyptians, but rather slaves and servants in ancient Egypt. Blacks in America had a connection to Egypt, but were not Egyptians, but rather slaves and servants in ancient Egypt. The interesting thing is, there's no writings from abolitionists or colonialists connecting blacks in America to Egyptian descent. But there are endless writers, historians, abolitionists, and slaves alike who connected blacks in America with the Hebrew people.
In this 1971 book, Jewish historian Stephen Jacobs and renowned author Dr. Rudolph Windsor make a definitive conclusion on the origins of black Americans. They especially concentrated their research from the era before 586 BC, which includes King Saul, King David, and King Solomon. This is what they say. The reason we have concentrated on this period in antiquity is to establish once and for all times that black Africans and their black American descendants are part of the root stock of what are commonly called the original Israelites. And their black American descendants are part of the root stock of what are commonly called the original Israelites.
In a critical review of Godby's book by the University of Chicago Press, Solomon B. Freehoff wrote the following in the Journal of Religion. The quote, "Lost tribes?" question is only a point of departure for a detailed study of Hebrew origins, Jewish dispersion, and worldwide propaganda for Yahoo worship, and the question of racial integrity of the Jews. Freehoff goes on to write, "There was a steady propaganda for Yahoo worship all through the ages, all over the ancient world, through Palestinian trade colonies and military settlements. Thus, most of North Africa, the whole Sahara region, Berber, Agal, and Negro became Yahoo worshippers and considered themselves B'nai Israel, the sons of Israel, or Philistim, Palestine. So if Yah is the God of the Bible, and the Bible commands to worship by his name, quote, sing unto Elohim, sing praises to his name, extol him that ride upon the heavens by his name, Yah, remember? Then the question you got to ask yourself is, why is that name only connected to Africa? And how did these people worship and know the name of the God of the Bible without the Bible? Now you might understand the title of Godby's book, The Lost Tribes, a Myth, a suggestion towards rewriting Hebrew history. How could the people be lost and they're right there in plain sight? Maybe, instead of being lost, they were hidden, or should I say, erased from history. Another story around that time that raises some eyebrows is from a newspaper in Hartford, Connecticut. Headline: Negro who can write Hebrew. He's deaf and dumb and comes from an African town. Hartford, Connecticut, September 19th. A young African Negro has been in the city for the last few days who claims to be a Hebrew. He is deaf and dumb and as black as the ace of spades. He carries a pad of paper with him and answers all questions by writing them in Hebrew and Loshen Kadesh. What excites the most wonder is that he writes Loshen Kadesh very rapidly. It's the language of the Book of Moses, spoken and written with ease only by the rabbis and highly educated Hebrews. The Negro was sent to one of the rabbis of Hartford, who was perfectly satisfied that he's a Hebrew. He says he comes from a large town in Africa, where there's a tribe of about 20,000 black Hebrews who speak Loshen Kadesh and are quite prosperous. He also says that his father is a rabbi in that town. What surprised him, he writes, is that no Hebrew knows of his countrymen in Africa. This story was forwarded special dispatch to the Baltimore Sun. Headline: Queen City visitor. A native African who is deaf and dumb reads Hebrew and says he's a Jew. With a slight change from the original article and a speculatory answer to why a native-born African's language would be Hebrew from another rabbi, a Mr. Stern, who postulated that, quote, sometimes Negroes purchased by the Jewish slave traders accepted Judaism. After circumcision, they were given freedom as a full-fledged Orthodox Jew. That sounds interesting, but never happened. There are no records of blacks gaining freedom by converting to Judaism. But there are records of Hebrew peoples and practices in North, West, Central, and South Africa over 1,000 years before the Portuguese even set foot in Africa, including circumcision.
They've gained a lot of attention. They've been around for a while, but social media really put them on a platform. Some of you may know them as Hebrew Israelites. What the Hebrew Israelites have preached isn't something new, but it was new to social media. And so a lot of people that had never heard the message or had never focused on the message began to pay attention, more attention, closer attention. One thing that I am wholeheartedly in agreement with, and we're going to focus on that today. For some of you, maybe you've heard it before. For some, it may be eye-opening. But I believe, due to my study, I've come across some information that I believe is irrefutable, if not near irrefutable. And that is that the slaves, transatlantic slavery, that those slaves are Israelites. And that if you're descendants of slaves, you're descendants of Israelites. Descendants of Hebrews. Now at one point, I was aware of this. As I began to move forward and study, I did come to the conclusion that maybe somewhere, wasn't quite sure about all. But now I hold a position that all were. But now I hold a position that all were.
Then we come to a picture which the European travelers drew of the Ashanti king, you see? And the Ashanti king had on his chest a breastplate, all right? This is the Israelite breastplate, spoken of in the Bible, with the 12 tribes on it and the different stones on it. Amen. They even go into detail about his dress and his head covering that the high priest would wear. None of the other people that was rowing the boats had a head covering. You see? The dude was dressed just like the high priest of the Old Testament, the Ashanti people. You see? And we can look at this and say, man, that's coincidence, but that's not coincidence. Especially when all the other facts lead us to believe, amen, that when Jerusalem fell, we didn't go to Europe, we went to Africa. And from Ghana, my friends, from that place in Ghana, is where the Gold Coast, the Ivory Coast, the Slave Coast was done. And a lot of y'all, when y'all take y'all DNA, y'all gonna come out, amen, like me and my wife from this area, Ghana, amen, from those other kingdoms. Now let me read one more thing. Stephen Jacobs, a European Jewish historian, says this: Black Americans now are in a position as never before in modern history to rediscover, somebody say rediscover, and reclaim, say reclaim, but here it is, if they wish, a heritage which has profoundly influenced world history and mankind. What heritage is that? The Hebrew heritage of Black Africa. The Hebrew heritage of Black Africa.